produced almost a third of everything humanity made. A land so incredibly wealthy that people would cross entire deserts, sail treacherous oceans, all for just a shot at trading with it. Well, that place was real, and it was India. Okay, let's dive into this amazing story of economic power, its epic rise, and its tragic collapse. So this is the big mystery we're going to try and solve today. If India was really the beating heart of the global economy for so long, what on earth happened? How does a superpower of that scale just lose its footing so completely? This isn't just a history lesson. It's a genuine case study in how wealth is built, and maybe more importantly, how it can all be lost. All right, to kick off our investigation, we've got to establish the facts. Just how big was India's economy? I mean, the scale of it is, well, it's honestly kind of hard for us to even wrap our heads around from where we stand today. At its absolute peak, India's slice of the world's GDP, the total economic output, was somewhere between 23 and 33%. Now, to put that in perspective for you, the United States today, the biggest economy in the world, makes up about 25%. So yeah, for centuries, India was the undisputed economic center of the planet. And look, this isn't just some wild claim or a nationalist myth. It's backed up by some seriously detailed research. These numbers you're seeing, they come from the work of the legendary economic historian Angus Maddison. The man dedicated his entire career to crunching the numbers on centuries of global output, giving us the hard evidence that our whole investigation rests on. And this quote, this just perfectly illustrates the real-world impact, right? We're not just talking about abstract figures here. Ancient Rome, a global superpower in its own right, was genuinely worried about how much of its gold was just flowing eastward to pay for Indian goods. So you see, India wasn't just part of global trade, it was dominating it. Now here's a really crucial point. This immense wealth didn't just happen by accident. It wasn't luck. Let's take a look at who these architects of wealth actually were. You can see a really clear progression here over time. It all started way back around 322 BCE with the Maurya Empire, who really laid the groundwork. Then, centuries later, you have the Gupta Empire, which kicked off a true golden age of commerce. And after them, the Chola Empire took all that power and projected it across the seas. Each one built on what the last one did, creating this incredible economic engine that ran for more than 1,000 years. So how'd they do it? Well, the Mauryas unified huge swaths of the subcontinent and built critical infrastructure, like a massive road network. The Guptas created this amazing environment where science, math, and business could just explode. But the Cholas, now, they were masters of a whole different game, the sea. They built these powerful navies to physically control the shipping lanes, which meant they basically controlled the flow of money. This is absolutely fascinating when you stop and think about it. The Chola strategy, physically controlling sea routes to guarantee your trade dominance, it's basically an ancient version of modern logistics. Today, we talk about controlling supply chains and economic corridors. Well, back then, the Cholas did it with warships, and they secured the arteries of global commerce for themselves. So we know who built the wealth, but what was the fuel for this economic engine? What was India actually making that the rest of the world just had to have? India was, for all intents and purposes, the world's workshop for luxury goods. It wasn't just exporting raw materials. It was exporting pure excellence. Its textiles were the best, period. Its woot steel, this unbelievably strong steel, was the stuff of legends, sought after by warriors for the best swords in the world. And of course, the spices. A total global obsession. It was this perfect storm of skilled artisans and advanced production that created things the world craved. And here it is. This is the single most important point for understanding India's power, because it was exporting so many high-value finished goods and importing less, it had a massive trade surplus. Gold and silver, the hard currency of the day, poured into India from every corner of the known world, and it stayed there. That's how you create unimaginable national wealth. But as we all know, that golden age couldn't last forever, and the fall, when it finally came, was incredibly fast and brutal. So now our investigation has to turn to the toughest question of all. What went wrong? The whole thing didn't just happen overnight. It was more like a domino effect, a sequence of events. First, you had internal weakness. The powerful Mughal Empire started to crack and fragment, which created a lot of instability. That weakness, well, it opened the door for step 2, European intervention. The British East India Company didn't show up as conquerors, they came as traders. But they were smart, and they exploited those internal divisions to become the rulers. And that led directly to step 3, the systematic takedown of Indian industry to create a captive market for British factories. This whole process, it has a name. Historians call it the drain of wealth. And it's exactly what it sounds like. The systematic transfer of India's resources, its capital, its riches, straight to Britain. We are talking about a one-way street of value that, by some estimates, would be worth trillions in today's money. The wealth didn't just disappear, it was moved. And this chart, this just shows you the absolutely devastating result. I mean, just look at those numbers. Around the year 1700, right before colonial rule really took hold, India's share of the global economy was almost 25%. By 1947, when the British finally left, it had collapsed just over 4%. This is the clearest evidence you will ever see of an economic catastrophe. So, after all that, after looking at the incredible rise and the catastrophic fall, what's the big takeaway from this story? And what does it all mean for us today as India's economy is once again becoming a major force in the world? I think the verdict from our investigation is pretty clear. India's historic wealth wasn't just some accident of geography. It was built, deliberately, on sophisticated systems of government, trade, and infrastructure. And its collapse is a powerful, powerful lesson. Internal weakness, internal division, it creates vulnerabilities that outside forces can and will exploit. And that kind of brings us to our final thought. As India reemerges as a global economic power, this history is more relevant than ever. It's a lesson in what made it a world leader in the first place. So the question for the future is, can this incredible past also serve as a blueprint? Something to think about. Thanks for joining me on this investigation.